Walter Tull, the incredible story of a football pioneer and war hero. He was one of English football's first black players and the British Army's first ever black officer to command white troops. But 100 years after he aged 29 on the battlefields of World War I, the name Walter Tull means little to most people. Tull was an orphan who had to overcome adversity all of his life, including being racially abused while a pioneering forward for Tottenham Hotspur and Northampton Town. His death received little media attention at the time, and it is only in recent years that his powerful story has started to be fully recognized, in large part due to the work of historian and biographer Phil Vasily. A campaign for Tull to be awarded the Military Cross is ongoing, with renewed calls for the Prime Minister to intervene. This is the forgotten story of a footballer and war hero. Tull enlisted with Middlesex Regiment, part of a footballers' battalion. The obituary of Walter Tull, 100 years on Second Lieutenant Walter Tull while engaged in combat near Arras in northern France. He was 29 in the early hours of 21 March 1918, a fog hung over much of the British line on the Western Front in France. At klockan 4:40, a German bombardment began. It was of a different order to any that had come before it. It marked the start of what became known as the German Spring Offensive, a last throw of the dice to turn the war in their favor and score a decisive breakthrough. Over the next 5 hours, more than 6,600 German guns fired 3.5 million explosive shells on British positions. The sound could be heard as far away as London. Into the midst of this death, destruction and chaos came Walter Tull, an officer of the British Army in spite of his non-European heritage, which should have barred such a commission. With the British Army fighting off its rearguard defensive action, Tull was shot and dead. Tull's mother and father passed away just 2 years apart. Tull had played many roles throughout his short life: a brother, a son, an orphan, a footballer, a soldier, an officer and, finally, a war hero. At every stage he had to overcome adversity and challenges, obstacles he refused to let define him. Born in Folkestone, his young life was marked by tragedy when his mother, Alice, died of breast cancer when Tull was just 7. 2 years later, his father, Daniel, passed away of heart disease. Daniel Tull had arrived in Britain from his native Barbados in 1876, having worked his way over as a cheese carpenter. Deaths of both parents left their children facing severe financial difficulties. Walter and his brother Edward were eventually taken in by an orphanage in Bethnal Green, part of an organization known today as Action for Children. Walter and Edward found themselves in the most precarious and vulnerable position, says the charity's chief executive Carol Eaton. They were welcomed into a national children's home, where staff encouraged Walter's love of football, helping to shape both the life he would lead and the man he would become. The brothers were together and kept in contact with the rest of their family back in Folkestone. Further trauma was to befall Tull, though, when he and his brother were separated through Edward's adoption by a couple from Glasgow. Now alone in the orphanage, Walter excelled at sport and went on to play for amateur team Captain FC. Tull's career at Spurs drifted due to the racial abuse he suffered. Spotted by Tottenham Hotspur, he was soon playing at White Hart Lane in front of crowds in the tens of thousands. One of the first black players in the English game, he was subjected to terrible racial abuse. One newspaper report at the time described how, during a match at Bristol City in 1909, a section of the crowd made a cowardly attack on him in language lower than Billingsgate. The reporter wrote, "Let me tell those Bristol hooligans that Tull is so clean in mind and method as to be a model for all white men who play football." In point of ability, if not actual achievement, Tull was the best forward on the field. His career at Spurs drifted following the racial abuse he suffered. Confined to the reserves, his fortunes were revived when Herbert Chapman signed him for Northampton Town in 1911 for a substantial fee. He went on to play 111 games for the club before the outbreak of World War I took his life down a radically different path. Tull was cited for gallantry and coolness after leading a night raid with 26 men. Tull enlisted with Middlesex Regiment, part of a footballers' battalion that drew professional players from a range of clubs. He fought extensively in the war, at one stage being sent home suffering from shell shock, what today would be diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder. He returned to the conflict, having been made an officer, and served on the Italian